Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am so excited for today's expert roundtable. We are going to dig into a topic that is really growing in relevance in our industry, mergers and acquisitions. We've brought together a fantastic panel. They are going to be sharing some real life experiences and insights. So no matter where you are in your journey of thinking of mergers and acquisitions or taking action on them, I think that you're going to walk away with some valuable information. So before I hand over this conversation to our host, Jeffrey Scott, who's going to be leading it, I'm just going to take a quick moment to introduce myself. I am Tracy Hart. I am Vice President of Customer Experience and Delivery at Halstead Media. I oversee our project management team, who works closely with our clients and our services and delivery teams. And we've definitely seen firsthand how mergers and acquisition activity is really shaping growth strategies in our industry and creating new needs when it comes to marketing systems, integrations, and brand alignment. So I am very happy to introduce Jeffrey Scott. He's going to be guiding our conversation. I know that many of you on here today already know Jeffrey. He is one of the most respected coaches and advisors in the green industry. He has helped hundreds of companies grow stronger, prepare for transitions, and lead with greater clarity. So with that, Jeffrey, I am happy to turn it over to you to kick things off.
Tracy, thank you very, very much.
Yes.
It's been a pleasure to work with Halstead over the last few years. And so thanks for inviting me and all of us onto your webinar. My name's Jeffrey Scott. I run Jeffrey Scott Consulting. We just had our, what was it, 17-year anniversary, I think, as Jeffrey Scott Consulting. So it's been a while, although I've really grown up in the industry. So uh, first as a contractor and then as a consultant. And we've worked with or around 350 companies in the US and Canada. We help them fix their business if they feel underpaid or overworked. We help them scale their business when they feel stuck and they've hit a ceiling. And we help them exit, whether it's selling or retiring in place. And so I'm going to draw on a lot of that as we talk today. Obviously, the huge trend is acquisitions, right? It's in every conference you go to, it's in every edition of every magazine you read. It's just the big thing. Although now that we have AI, that's also become the big thing, but that's a separate webinar. And so, everyone listening who owns a business, you will be selling your business. I guarantee it. Whether you're dying or you're giving it to one of your kids, or you're actually selling it. So, everyone's going to be selling, but not everyone is going to be buying. And so this webinar is to give you some permission to be on the buying side. You know the expression buy low, sell high, right? That's what people who are acquiring, they're buying your smaller company for a fair market. They're rolling up and then they have a larger company which has a higher valuation. And so that's just very natural, but you can do the same. And I really feel like you should be doing the same. And that's why we have who we have as guest speakers here to talk about their experience in acquisitions. Just to give it some perspective, if you have earned some money, you're going to put some in the stock market. I'm sure everyone here has, and probably everybody listening has some money in the stock market. And the price to earnings ratio, the PE ratio, is generally around 20 to 25, although it's been higher recently in the S&P 500. But that means that you're paying 20 times the earnings for that stock. And that's really how companies get valuated. Do they pay one times earnings or two times earnings? You know, the really small companies, that's how much they sell for. And then a little bit bigger companies sell for, three, four, five times earnings. And then some are selling for five, six, seven times earnings um, and so on. And so the bigger and more successful the company, the higher the earnings. And so that's what buy low, sell high can mean. It means you, no matter your size, can buy smaller companies, and then integrate them into your company, and overall your company is going to be worth more. And so you build value that way. I would say I gave some thought to this webinar, and really there's two reasons to acquire that I came up with. I'm sure there's a lot more, and all you guys on the panel here will probably tell me all the other reasons, but you could put it into two camps. One is you just are trying to grow revenue, right? I'm buying a company to get their accounts and I'm trying to fortify a division or revenue. And the other reason would be more strategic. I'm trying to make some kind of change or make some kind of move, and I'm buying companies to do that. And I think you'll hear, or I know you'll hear both sides uh, today with our guest speakers. I was doing some research recently on some of my clients that have been bought by Mariani Premier Group, who is buying companies. And really, it was all the companies that we've been coaching. And so we felt really good about that. And that also tells me that, fortifying a business goes a long way to making it attractive to a buyer out there when it is time for you to sell. And so, well, I'll pull on some of that knowledge as well as we're speaking here today. And so, with that, I just want to say we have Sean Baxter here. I'm going to have Sean speak in a second, but Sean's both a executive coach at our company and he's a contractor with a 10 plus $1 million business. He's done his own acquisition. So, Sean, you have a lot to offer, but I'm going to call you up in a bit for that. But first, I'd like to really introduce our main guests here, Bill Dysert, Scott Frampton, and Ted Lucia. Ted, do you want to introduce yourself first
Sure.
and just tell us a little bit about you?
Yep. So I'm Ted Lucia from Lucia Landscaping. We're in the Metro Detroit region. We service primarily Michigan, southeastern Michigan, a little bit on the west side of the state, and then also just recently grew into the Toledo, Ohio market. So pretty excited about that. We primarily do landscaping and snow and ice management. Snow and ice management has been a large revenue source for us over the past probably 5 or 6 years. And we also own a separate company which focuses in on more technician-based services, so irrigation, lighting, construction, and then recently our newest division there was plumbing, which we launched last year. And so had some great growth. We'll be up hopefully around 35 to 38% this year and organically. And acquisitions have been part of our story. And so there's definitely some exciting things there. So a little bit about us additionally. We flex in between about 150 to 200 employees annually, depending on the services that are being offered and the seasonality of the business. And we're also an EOS ran company. So I love EOS and I love the cadence of it.
Ted, don't you have another division, or was that sort of talked about in Toledo?
We also have another division as well that we just launched about a year or so ago. It's our national division, and we're in 26 states. That company focuses all on landscape snow, and the concept behind that is to grow in the exterior division as well. So that's for multi-site properties.
Yeah, you definitely love diversification.
Yeah, I learned that in school and finance. I don't know if that was a good or bad thing, but I do love diversification.
Ted, thanks very much. Ted's a member of one of our peer groups, and it's been great to watch you diversify.
Thank you.
Scott Frampton.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Landscape Renovations is in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul in the state of Minnesota. Our business is primarily residential, custom home, custom designed, landscape design build, and bid build. We also perform landscape maintenance services for most of those customers as well. We have a over 100 member team. About 25 of our team members are focused on maintenance. The remaining team members are in either the management of the business or construction. We had acquired a landscape architecture firm in 2022. And that same year, we also acquired a natural stone construction business as well. But all of those businesses are based in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul.
Thank you very much. What's one unique thing about your business?
I think maybe not so unique with the people that are listening here, but I would say the fact that we're primarily focused in residential, we haven't yet started thinking about commercial maintenance, which is a very hot topic as well. It's something that potentially could happen as an acquisition in the near future, but it isn't our main focus. So we really are narrowed in on residential landscape design and maintenance.
Ted, did we do a podcast together a while back?
We did. I think we did one or two.
Yeah, we did. And then I did one recently with Scott on the art of design build versus bid build. That was very, very, very interesting. So if you guys can go back, I'll put in the chat where to find my podcasts. If you want to learn more about these first two gentlemen. Thank you, Scott. Bill Dysert.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Halstead, for the invite to join this panel conversation today. Exscape Group is located in Cleveland, Ohio, formerly Exscape Designs. We service the greater Cleveland market currently and are expanding out from here. Our size today is around 22 million in revenue and 160 employees. Our niche, I think our niche is culture and people, but from a service standpoint, it's generally residential design build, about 50%, and then about 40% in maintenance, which is half high-end residential and half what I'll call small to mid-sized commercial, and then 10% snow removal services. So I got plenty of that last year. Right now, what are we working on? We're building shared services. So taking some of our pro level type programs, anything from Aspire to accounting to marketing and IT from a pro level to an enterprise level so that we can continue to turn those on in new branches and new markets and help ultimately grow and create opportunity for people and better service for our clients.
Excellent. That's a lot of unique things. Is there one more unique thing you want to add?
We're on a aggressive growth strategy here over the next 3 to 5 years. So I actually combined with a company on the west side of Cleveland, Green Impressions, back in June. It was something that we worked on for well over a year and a half together and found an outside investment firm partner to join us on this growth journey. And it's been really fun. We're about 120 days in, and it is like strapping rockets to what you're doing, and it's building a fighter jet as you're sort of flying it. So yeah, it's been exhilarating and fun, and just looking forward to the next several years here.
Scott as well as and a member of one of our peer groups, and Bill, you used to be, and I remember you were driving me to the airport maybe and telling me how somebody had made you an offer to buy your business. This is before PE was even a thing. And you're like, I think I'm going to turn them down. And like, you really come a long way since then. Just wanted to.
Yeah, the peer groups have made a huge impact on my career for sure, and our business, and specifically the way we approach anything from operations to strategy to people. Firmly believe in that approach. Scott was an awesome peer group member, and we stay in touch still to this day. So
yeah, let's jump right in. Let's go back to your first acquisition. How did that go? How did it go poorly? And I'm asking this question because there's people listening who may want to do their first acquisition, right? So explain a little bit about how it went and what you've learned since then. Ted, you want to go first?
Learned a lot, Jeffrey. So I think my first acquisition involved index cards, which sounds exciting. But basically, the company we acquired, instead of being on a CRM system, and having or an Excel CSV file, whatever it is, QuickBooks, it pretty much consisted of acquiring a few employees and a set of index cards. And there wasn't that much due diligence involved in that one. It was pretty straightforward and performance-based, so it was kind of a win-win for us in terms of risk mitigation. But basically, we acquired a small irrigation company, and we were able to convert about 80% of the clients over, which we have learned a lot of good lessons on since. There wasn't a lot of pre-thought in it, I will tell you. It was more or less that, an opportunity presented itself and we were able to jump in. But I can, if when you're ready, Jeffrey, I can give you some lessons learned and some other
Yeah.
details.
Yeah. I'll towards the end, I'm going to come around and ask everybody that question. So Scott told us that he's made two acquisitions, both I would call in the strategic category. Ted, and I think Bill said that well, he didn't quite say it, but I'll ask him again. But tell us, Ted, you've done a lot of acquisitions, mostly on the irrigation service side. You want to give us some numbers or some just
Yeah,
color?
I think combined on the irrigation service side, we've done somewhere between 10 and 12 acquisitions. They were all ranging from maybe up to like $750,000 up into that kind of $1.75 million range in total. And so a lot of small kind of 1 to 5 man companies that we purchase. And we can, I can talk at some point about how we did that, why we did that, and then how we were able to kind of dial that in and what the, ROI looked like on it.
Well, why don't we just dive in a little bit deep here? This is a little rabbit hole that we'll dive into. So go a little bit further on that. I think everyone here wants to hear
Yeah.
it too.
Okay. So after we did our first acquisition, obviously a lot of lessons learned, especially on the integration end. The integration end, I think, is one of the most important components. Obviously, the bigger the company, the more due diligence you want to do. But what we've learned is that the integration end ended up being extremely important. But we did structure a lot of the deals in terms of risk to work on on a performance-based deal. So paid over kind of a 1 to 2 year period. So what we did was, to find these acquisitions, a lot of times we'd find lists of companies and start off by sending them a letter in the mail and then a phone call behind to obviously see if we can get in touch with the owner. The first round we did, I think we had almost a 20% response rate from owners, which I thought was staggering. I never expected to get that much of a response rate. Some of the people responding, obviously, at that time were significantly larger than our company, and all the way down to like a $250,000 level. So we met with them. We put together a due diligence checklist. So just step-by-step process of what we'd be looking for. After meeting with them, we'd give them the due diligence checklist, and then we'd work through it. I mean, it was kind of, I know Jeffrey's always big into recruiting, and we read this book called Who, which is a great recruiting book. If you use the same tactics on the acquisition side, it's kind of like sales, right? You're trying to hook them in, right? And, depending on the company and the person that you're talking to, they want to believe that you understand their business, right? That they're unique, and that you're not just another person trying to acquire them, right? They typically are a little, what's the word? Very confident people, and you got to figure out a way to build a connection. So I don't think it's any different than sales or recruiting. So once you build that connection, you're going through this due diligence phase. You're trying to work with them. What we found is that most of the companies that we made offers to, probably about 30% of them would come back to the table at a later point, meaning they would either go shop the market or they would go incur more pain. And what I mean by pain is, there's a reason they want to sell. And all the reasons are very similar when you start to line them up, right? They don't realize it when they're talking to you, but you're putting the common denominator together. And so once they incur more pain, they're more likely to come to the table. And that's fine, right? The companies that we were able to get right away, they had already probably suffered enough pain. And the name of the game in pain was either, they hit a ceiling and they couldn't move beyond it, or they couldn't find employees, they couldn't find more people like them. Those were more common reasons. The other reasons were retirement. That's probably the bulk of the companies that we've acquired. So we went through the due diligence phase. Having a good checklist is pretty important. Obviously, the smaller the company, I think the smaller the due diligence process. And then further, if it's the right structure, meaning paid on performance, I think you might have a little less due diligence to do as well, right? Because there's less risk. So I think those are important topics. And then integration, right? What does this integration look like from a office end, clerical end, integration into your software, whatever that may be? Like I said, the first one we started off was on index cards, and my team kind of looked at me like, well, "What is this? What am I supposed to do right here?" Right? I've gotten that reaction several times in my career from them. But then obviously, if they're on existing software, it's probably not going to be the same CRM system we're on. So how are we going to integrate that? How are we going to introduce ourselves to the client? I think this is a very important topic, and you kind of want to hedge a little bit here and do a soft, I guess, cadence for introduction. If you can onboard the new owner, I think you're going to have a better ROI on the clients, right? If you can have a performance-based plan with the owner, you're going to have a better ROI on clients, right? Because they're going to want to make sure these clients are being onboarded. And typically we'd run some type of phase of this over a 1-year period, and we can get into the details of that, if we want. And then, I think it's also important to mention, what does success look like? I think you should know that going into the acquisition of a company. What does success look like? Because I always think with the end in mind and work backwards, right? I love thinking like that. And so if we know what success looks like, we can build the metrics behind it and then guide our team into hitting those metrics. So if our metric is, hey, we want an 80% conversion on the clientele, how are we going to hit that, right? And so every acquisition strategy is a little bit different in terms of what a win looks like. I will give you, Jeffrey, you had mentioned there were 2 reasons, I think, why acquisitions. I think there's a third. For companies that have grown their infrastructure and overhead, I think an acquisition also could make sense if you have the right talent, the right people, right? So you can grow into that overhead model and profitability.
Gotcha. Understood. So that's another reason to grow the revenue, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was excellent, Ted. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Scott, think back to your first acquisition. What worked well? What didn't? What did you learn?
Yeah, very good. I'm gonna go back a little further. I think it's the first acquisition that didn't happen. So along the way, Bill and Ted, we all may have had some experience with acquisitions that didn't happen, ones that we started pursuing that didn't work out. And the very first one that didn't happen, that didn't work out, was the acquisition of my father's company. That resulted in the founding of Landscape Renovations with my business partner. And along the way, or right off the bat, I had talked with my business partner about what my vision was for the business and wanted to make sure that we were aligned with that vision. And we wanted that legacy business, a business that we could build that would outlast us. So with that in mind, we always expected that there could be acquisitions along the way that we would add to our company, and ultimately we would be acquired either by our management team or a different business. That was part of our future from day one. And along the way, we've had many opportunities for acquisition with people that we've talked with in the industry, people that we know that come along the way. And in many cases, we've made offers to businesses that ultimately they said no, or they didn't like our offer. But our offers were well intended, meaning, as Jeffrey started with, buy low, sell high, evaluating the risk with your due diligence. What value does this opportunity add to us for growth? How much risk is there? Meaning, in my mind, the risk had almost more to do with the capacity of our management team to take on the acquisition with what that business needed to be successful, as much as the financial piece of it. So in the cases where we didn't acquire the companies, it was likely that they needed a lot of work, and the price that we were offering was what we thought we would need to make up the difference between what they wanted by adding staff or more time, and extending the return on the investment, so to speak. So in that case where we've made offers that haven't been accepted, I have no regret whatsoever, none whatsoever. And I guess I would say our first two acquisitions, we had two small acquisitions I don't even count that were back further in time, but the two most recent ones that are noteworthy happened the same year. They were smaller acquisitions that didn't require a lot of due diligence, like Ted was suggesting. Very small owner-operator businesses that we thought could add real value to our businesses. So the decision making was fairly simple. But the relationship building with these future these future partners in our business, meaning we weren't buying them and sunsetting these owners. We were buying these businesses and making them part of our team long term. So that's part of our strategy for the long term, was adding these talented individuals to strengthen our bench. And that was part of what was attractive to us with adding those teams. And
So
I think,
that's the LA and the Mason.
correct. Mhm. Correct. And I think, for the most part, that's any other acquisitions we'd be looking at would probably have that same common denominator for us.
So any lessons learned on that? So the first one was the LA, is that right? The LA firm?
Well, they actually happened within a week of each other. They happened at the same time,
Okay.
simultaneously.
Anything you would do different next time?
It's, I've reflected on that quite a bit. And, within the team, within the management team of the company, there's a lot of ideas of what you would do differently, right? Because the impact on the team is different than it is on me, right? Because they're the ones doing the day-to-day work. Um, but for me, I can't think of anything that I would have done differently to get a different level of success. I think um, things are working out naturally and organically the way they would in any acquisition.
Okay. Well, thank you, Scott.
You're
That
welcome.
it sounds like you have another one in mind, the way you're talking there. Can't wait to
Well,
see it.
there's always a possibility. Mhm.
Excellent. Excellent. So very strategic purchases. Ted's with the irrigation is really about building up scale in one of his main divisions. Bill, tell us about your first acquisition. And actually just tell us the whole story. I guess you've done a couple, is it?
Yeah. Never thought about doing acquisitions until 2015. I went through an entrepreneurial master's program and started learning about growth through acquisition. It sounded interesting, and then coincidentally enough, an aging owner, somewhat competitor but friendly competitor, reached out and said he wanted to exit. It took us about 2 years to get the deal done. I think, advisors can slow things down. Non-M&A attorneys can slow things down. The busyness of the season can slow things down, but ultimately, we both were focused on wanting to get something done. With that deal, we were probably 4.5 million at the time, and we were going to 6 with the acquisition. It was an enterprise acquisition, so we bought the property, 7-acre property with the buildings, and we're relocating our operations and office to the facility here. And then the owner wanted to exit within like 3 months. So probably one of my biggest blind spots in that was not having enough infrastructure to support the client transitions and the cultural transition internally that was about to occur. They had maybe 15-ish, field employees that were very rooted in and had been here for a long time. So all of a sudden it's like, here comes Exscape marching on our property, renovating our building, and all these things are changing and moving so quickly. Not having enough focus on that customer transition led to more attrition than there should have been. Um, so at the end of the day, everything ended up working out fine, other than there was a bit more attrition there than I would have hoped for, especially in our customer focus centric model. So I would approach that a little bit differently.
Can I summarize that to make sure I understood what you said?
Sure.
You're saying you had so much change going on internally that the customer got a little left behind.
Correct. It was almost like we were bringing it in the front door. We were, you know, tracking that very well. We were messaging very well around it to the customers, but we weren't this on the service side. There were things because it was an owner dependent process before we acquired them. He watched every single detail along the way. Some of those details did not get transitioned well into our process and system. Therefore, we lost some customers out the back door, unintentionally, obviously, but it was just one of those blind spots.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
And how many have you done since then?
so 2017 was approached by another competitor. That one actually went pretty quick. That company was about 50% design build, 50% maintenance. Was not an enterprise acquisition. We purchased the equipment outright on the front end, and then we did a more of an earnout style on the revenue side of things. Their team joined our team. One of the really exciting things that happened with that acquisition was some of the folks that were inside of that company really grabbed onto our culture and have become some of our mid-level management that's still here today. So what we talk about a lot around acquisitions is the opportunity for people to grow because we've seen it happen. There could be these ceilings in place within the company due to lack of growth or lack of diversification or whatever it might be, is to then they come into Exscape and we're fully growth mindset. It unlocks these opportunities for people. So that's a really fun takeaway. That owner ultimately didn't stick with us. I think the conversation was something like, I thought I wasn't a lone wolf, but I realized I am a lone wolf. And so, we parted ways amicably, maybe 18 months, 2 years into it. And all of the customers stayed and we kept servicing and moving forward. So um, the third one was another enterprise acquisition, was in 2019 when we were looking to expand into commercial maintenance that brought on another satellite location for us. Again, the owners joined our team. One is still with us today. And we run that very much as an operations satellite, maybe 6 to 8 crews run out of that location, expanded us into kind of a newer territory, newer subset of clients, largely successful. And we run a lot of our snow operations out of that branch now because it's a little bit closer to the commercial market that we want to service. So a little bit different reason for that acquisition versus the first two, which was much more build the base maintenance clientele, which also builds the business in terms of design build opportunities and cross-selling. The fourth one, which happened maybe 2 years ago, because we're wrapping that thing up now in terms of the contract, was more of an assumption of contracts. So that owner was looking to keep a piece of the business. He really liked the construction side, the bulk material side. We assumed the contracts for the maintenance and snow side of the business and worked a commission structure, earnout, royalty, whatever you want to call it, over a couple year period. The interesting thing about that one was we had a lot of trust in the relationship. We've known each other for a long time. We started as a subcontractor for them and then transitioned into, hey, why don't you guys just take this over and let's come up with a purchase price or an earnout that works for me. So largely, again, look at that as very successful, that he achieved what he wanted in this. And then we were also able to expand and grow in the same area that we were already operating. And most recently, the combination with Green Impressions was more of a formal process. We wanted to merge. was a much larger deal. We went through the process with the sim and really going out and looking for that investment partner, and landed with a firm out of Connecticut that felt really comfortable with, and ultimately were able to bring something together in June. Green Impressions and Exscape Designs were very similar organizations, about 50% construction, 50% maintenance, and with a small component of snow to that. And that we were almost felt like we were carbon copies on each side of Cleveland. If anybody knows Cleveland, it's almost like there's a glass wall down the center of town. So very little overlap, a lot of synergy. We both do pools as well. So a lot of synergy in client relationships, a lot of synergy in, potentially shoring up some snow capacities, irrigation division, lawn care division. So I think for us, the first four were largely we were approached, and the fourth one was really hey, this is an opportunity, and pushing forward to get that done. Um,
Okay. Ted, did you have I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, I had a follow-up question for you, Bill. I believe if I heard you correctly, you said there was an acquisition you did where you purchased the service side of the owner's business, and he held on to maybe the supply side
correct.
or construction side. What was that? How did that go? Was that a complex acquisition in terms of integration? And I mean, what was the outcome?
It was the simplest one, actually, because it was essentially an agreement that was an assumption of contracts.
Okay.
And because we had subcontracted for the prior season for both snow and maintenance, we were very comfortable with the client base, and they had
Yeah.
already seen our trucks. So it was a very natural transition. And the assumption of contracts agreement is, you take a typical, I look at an acquisition process as sort of three components. It's sort of explore, find a win-win scenario, get to LOI, due diligence process, let's get into the nitty-gritty and make sure we both understand what we're getting ourselves into,
Mhm.
and then in post integration. And so with this one, it was basically like there was no due diligence because we were just taking the contracts and putting them into our system and,
Okay.
and documenting the royalty structure around it.
So no branding, anything like that.
No,
No
no,
assets. Okay.
yeah.
So, Bill, you just said something I think would be good to repeat for the audience. The three phases. You want to say those again? I think that would be important for people to understand the difference.
Sure. Yeah, I think of an M&A process in whatever it might be, a merger, assumption of contracts potentially, or a straight out acquisition, as sort of explore and discover to an LOI. And that's sort of the first stop, is getting to a letter of intent or an indication of interest, in IOI, where a firm would say, this is what I'm willing to pay, and this is the structure by which this deal could come together. And it's sort of high level. It's more like 10,000 feet. We've done some diligence. We've got an NDA in place. We've got enough information that we feel relatively confident that this is what it looks like. Okay. The next phase would be the due diligence process, where we're actually getting into the real nitty gritty. We're confirming everything that we found and talked about in the explore phase. And that due diligence process could be, it could be 30 days, it could be 60 to 90 days. It's largely dependent, again, on the flow of information and how quickly we can get things back, and if it's templatized and sortable in Excel formats and things like that. Clear contracts to review, not on handshakes. We can talk about value drivers, obviously, as we move forward in the conversation. But and then we get through that due diligence phase, which is obviously going to include the legal documentation as well of a purchase agreement and largely employment agreements and all those types of things. And then we get into the integration, which Ted mentioned, having a clear integration playbook and a checklist so that everybody's on the same page of how are we going to approach customers and marketing and internal payroll, adding people to payroll, or, all the things in the back office that have to happen. And from a marketing and branding standpoint, how are we going to talk about our story? How are we going to take our story to the marketplace here about what just happened, and make sure that it's successful for our customers, your customers, and our people?
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. I think people know intellectually what you just said. I'm sure you did too. And I'm sure after stubbing your toes, getting a bloody nose here and there, you're like, oh, we really need to do this. And then you start to put it in place.
I think my first integration checklist my CPA gave me, and it was sort of something he had pulled from another client or something like that. And it was literally just thinking through, okay, if I had to start this business again, what are the things that I need to do and integrate and implement to make sure that it lines up with the way we do things now? And I've addressed everything I possibly can, from legal to accounting to HR to IT to marketing and branding. So now we've gotten a little bit smarter about it by actually documenting the process in front of the checklist, which is really helpful to also get on the same page with our partnerships as we move forward, as to exactly how we are going to do that, what it's going to look like, and ultimately some value drivers that we can bring as a partnership and through our shared services to help bolster growth, opportunity for people, possibly better service to customers, and then also a technology component that may not exist within the organization.
Yeah, I can imagine. Scott?
Yeah, Jeffrey, thank you. I wanted to add to what Bill was talking about on the legal side. I think that I may have overlooked that when you said, you know, what would I have done differently? I didn't think of how difficult that was. And I think it has potentially a lot to do with who we picked as our legal partner to out the gate. And I probably didn't put enough effort into that out the gate. And so that could have been actually the most difficult and time consuming part of the process for me and for us. And then obviously, Bill, that checklist that you're talking about, whether that's formal or informal, of course, you've got that checklist, right? And having that guiding the decision making for the group. So, Bill, obviously, you're not likely doing this unilaterally, you're doing it with the management team. I think if that management team has a checklist that they're going from, that just helps clear the path for everybody involved. So in our case, I think that, you know, would have helped potentially, you know, for the management team to kind of understand how that was building and coming together. And then the last thing was that you mentioned, I want to follow up on, was the customer service side of it. We always had a way of being and how we do things, right? As you add other business owners and what they've done historically in their business and how we do business together was something that we needed to improve on. So we had to put a significant amount of work in that practice together to get to where we are today, which took about 18 months to work through. And it was a bit challenging for the team overall. But at the end of the day, I think we've actually improved overall. Everyone did improve overall as a result of that.
That's excellent. I have a question for you guys on ROI, but before I do that, because at some point we're really going to run out of time, I want to invite Sean into the conversation. Sean has his own unique story on acquisitions, plus he's helped our clients with their own businesses. I'm not sure which direction you'll take this, Sean, but let me introduce you to the conversation.
Thanks, Jeff. Actually, I have a question for all three panelists. And what I want to know personally is, and especially for Scott and Bill, you said that the owners of the companies you acquired ended up working within the business. You must have had some conversation with them, 6 months in, a year in. Did they share with you what they wish, once they got into your organization, they had done differently in building their business? Or did that reveal anything about their experience? And Ted, if you've got something similar, I'm curious to know what they said. Man, I really like what you guys were doing, and I wish we would have done this earlier. Is there any aha moments?
Yeah, for us, it was very simple. I think Jeffrey even maybe noted on it in the opening, is that they had hit a ceiling. They weren't able to grow their businesses to where they wanted to grow with the team that they had or the infrastructure that they had. And they really wanted to be part of an organization that was focused and had the ability to grow. That was it.
Bill?
Yeah, probably three main themes. Technology would definitely be one. We've been very, it started with Boss and then went to Aspire. I think that can be a pro and a con for owners transitioning if they've never been around technology, but at the end of the day see the benefit in that. Culture and people, one of the owners really struggled to build account management team to be able to service the clients. And, we're very open to hiring the right people and teaching them the industry side of things and the horticulture side of things. Those would be the main two themes, I'd say, is the team building, people side of things and the tech.
Not being
Okay.
afraid to hire.
I can give you a third perspective. On my end, one of them was hiring a sales team faster, not having anyone in sales, right? The owner doing the sales, and should have hired someone in sales. And the other one was building a training academy. So especially for like technician-based work, right? It's hard to find more of you. And there seems to be this growing age of talent, right? That's retiring off. And so how do you build more talent or build more technical skills? And one of the best ways to do that is building a training academy. And that, therefore building people that don't have that skill set into that skill set and hiring more on like character than anything else.
Yeah, I think for me, some of the experiences that we had in a smaller acquisitions, the work that it takes to integrate, a big regret for me and maybe for their team too, was just it seems to me that buying a small company, a medium company, or a large company, the work is about the same, right? So the effort that you put forth to integrate these acquisitions, I personally would no longer seek smaller deals just because of all the effort that goes into it. I want to make sure it has some sort of lasting impact for them, for me, for my team. Um, I think for our clients, we have a lot of clients that really are doing quite well and they have no motivation, at least in their head, to sell now. And I think it's a good practice to pretend like you are. Like Jeffrey said at the opening, everyone at some point is going to end their career and not want to work anymore. And having a sellable business starts today. It's the work every day of having systems and processes in place. And if you don't sell, great, you'll love where you work or where you don't work. If you do sell, you'll be worth so much more. And that rings true every single client that we help, adopt systems and processes. And I know internally for our team, we would never look at another company who wasn't on a mainline software again. We
No
did a
more index
deal.
cards.
No more index cards. If I won't throw out any brands, but they've got to be on some sort of relevant software or we don't even want to look. It's just too much work for us. So I think that's probably a lesson learned in my own career, and certainly as we're coaching, index card systems aren't very valuable to the buyer. They're not very valuable for the operator. So I think those things have come about. I loved what Scott said about, the strategy around sort of purchasing pieces of a business that you need or that you want to pull in. I think that's really smart. And Bill mentioned that several of their acquisitions ended up being leaders in their company. So I think that's a really key strategy around acquisitions. And then Ted just nailed it with infrastructure, right? How many people have started building a irrigation department and have just enough to be dangerous, but not enough to have proper management behind it? And so it's such a great idea to be able to integrate somebody quickly so that you can have the proper management staff in place for that to really fly. So I think those were really, really strong lessons that I concur. I see it. We coach on it. Um, I think those are all really relevant to this topic.
I do want to add, I said, or Scott said one of his two acquisitions was a masonry or masonry company, but that guy is super duper bright and you're lucky to have him. He's a great addition to your team. That was
Yeah, and he just brought home 2 national awards from the weekend. So more on that later.
excellent. So let me ask an ROI question. We'll start with Ted. how do you define ROI for an acquisition? Um, give us some numbers, give it a little bit of, give some definition to that topic.
I think what we're looking for are three probably key areas. First one is going to be payback period. So most of the acquisitions that we've done on some type of performance based system. And so if we can acquire these companies, essentially get a payback within a year and a half, maybe 2 years max, that's, kind of in our wheelhouse, what we're looking for. And then, next one I'd say is cross-selling. So we typically see somewhere around 10 to 20% in new opportunities just based on all the service lines that our company has. So we take this acquisition in, let's just say, for example, it's a, irrigation company. And now we can, offer to them plumbing services, which is an easy offering onto it, lawn care services, right? Snow services, whatever it may be, and immediately see a return. Now that is done through marketing, that's done through campaigns that are, strategic in nature, and some other maybe AI tools that we're able to generate that type of cross-selling from. We do want to see that increase in the future, but that 10 to 20% is what we've seen as new revenue opportunities through there. And then additionally, just through our workforce, we found that we can find additional value on upselling. So let's say it's a technician, he goes to a home or a building. Just by the way we operate, and a lot of this comes out of our training academy, by the way we operate, we can find more value that we can deliver to the homeowner, residence owner, by building options, right? So typically we build what's called options, and we're presenting maybe up to 3 options, where a lot of the companies we've acquired aren't going through these type of systems or process, or even presenting options, or they're just burning through their service calls, right? Or their services. And so they're just kind of going, the old way worked, right? So we got, incurred $10,000 out of this client every year. We should be able to get 10,000. Well, you might have left 20, additional, 10%, $2,000 on the table with that client. So if you can present value add through training, you can, probably generate another 10 to 15% in the first year on that. So, combined, you got 10 to 20% in additional opportunities based on additional service lines. And then you got another 10 to 15% value add selling. So, and those are just a couple examples. I think there's a lot more value that you can find.
Yeah. Mathematically, let's say you pay 2x for a company, although it sounds like you're saying X and a half, but whatever. If you can grow the revenue in that same time period, you're really shrinking what you paid for the company.
Yep.
Kind of an interesting way to measure it. By the way, when I say buy low, sell high, I do not mean take advantage of anybody. What I mean is smaller companies, less well-run companies are worth less than larger companies that are better run. And finally, you can take it all the way to the stock market where they're worth 20 times, their earnings. And so it's really this ladder that you climb up. It's not meant to, when I say this, it's not meant to say, hey, we're taking advantage of anybody. It's just part of the game there.
I think it's the opportunity of the lift on dollars or multiplier.
Yeah, exactly. Scott, how do you look at ROI with your couple acquisitions?
Very good. Our ROI was very similar to Ted's. We didn't plan it that way. It turned out that way. So I think our arc, we were hoping for a 5-year return, and it happened in a shorter time period, and it was about 2 years. But the revenue increase was even more significant now 3 years in than we expected. So that's been a good surprise, and it's got us very excited about what we can do going forward. So I think having that well defined, those expectations in advance, is definitely a part of that checklist, right? So that everybody kind of knows what to expect, including that new team member if they're joining your team, of course, right?
That's excellent. I remember when you did it, you're like, I don't have it all figured out, but I know it's a good idea. We're going to do this. Bill, for you, how do you define ROI?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was thinking about it as Ted and was talking about that. I think the first three or so was kind of like, I just want growth. We just need more customers. So the the ROI though probably came in different ways. It probably came more so expanding the business, not only through the revenue growth, but also through the facilities. And it was almost like a build it and they will come type of approach. So, like I said, the build the base, build the business. Build the base means build the base contract customers. And because we are already a design build company, there's a very natural cross-sell ability that happens there, which has come true on each one. But the properties, I would say, add a lot to the ROI. The people add a lot to the ROI. Each acquisition has its own very unique identity, as in, I've noticed the different companies have a different culture that's very sort of attached to the owner and how they operate and how they think. So unlocking that potential has an ROI of its own. Now kind of in the strategy that we're on and going forward, yeah, it's a lot more of a numbers game. But our ultimately our success will lie in finding partners that align with our culture, our people focus, want to grow, see the shared services as a benefit to help unlock potential within their companies, be able to take and harvest some of the fruits of their labor from all the years, and then also be a partner in our longer term strategy. So we very much look at it that way now. The ROI is, it's down the road here. Whatever train stop number one is going to be, if it's in 3 years or 5 years or beyond, the value is in creating a great company that's very large, with a lot of opportunity for people and customers to expand through our service offering. So,
Okay. Tracy, before I bring you on to just give us the marketing support view of this, I just want to summarize a couple points. When you're negotiating with someone to buy their company, a lot of buyers have this preconceived notion. Sometimes it's how much their company's worth. And you can't change a buyer's mind, but you can still negotiate. And in theory, a buyer or a seller, I mean, they can try to control the price or the terms, but they can't really control both. And so if you feel pushed in a corner on one of those, you can get some leverage on the other one. I think Ted talked about finding out what's really important to the seller. Every seller's different, just like every client's different. When you're buying a team, if you're trying to buy their employees, it's like hiring a team. So do your values really line up? And I think that doesn't get enough attention with early on when people are starting to do acquisitions until they don't work. And then they realize like, oh yeah, the values really need to line up if I'm expecting any of these people to be part of my team. Another thing to think about is, can you buy the company on borrowed money? I mean, that's what a lot of PE firms do, right? They'll put in some of their own money, they'll borrow some money. Really, that's what Ted said he's doing. He's buying the company, and there's a bit of an earnout from the owner, so he's borrowing money from the seller. And so wherever you borrow money from, it can come with more risk, but it can also bring you more leverage and a higher ROI ultimately. And lastly, I want to talk about 50-50 partners. I have at least one client, and really more than that, where through an acquisition, they became a 50-50 partner. And then they realized, uh-oh, this partner is not going, generally, it doesn't want to go as aggressive or as far as I want to go with this. And now what? And how do we make decisions? So if you're doing something that puts you into that shared ownership position. It's like a marriage. Actually, it's more than a marriage because it seems like marriages are easy to get divorced these days. A lot harder when you've put all your assets in with somebody else in a true merger of assets. And so being clear up front on how decisions get made, what if it doesn't work, having some tough decisions or conversations up front if you're entering into a 50-50 merger. So some things to think about there. Tracy, tell us how to think about the marketing side in all this.
Yeah, well, I think the marketing side really coincides with a lot of what I heard in terms of the pain points of these things and the things that worked. So, how we think about the marketing is it's not just about promotion, it's really about alignment and clarity and growth. And a lot of the disconnect can happen when those things don't happen at the foundational level. So, when we think about like a legacy for our clients who are even single branch. We want to think about setting them up for success, which a lot of you talked about in terms of what you might look at for buying a company. So making sure they have that infrastructure, making sure they have the technology, making sure they have the brand that you're looking for. So I think that, when we talk about marketing, when we talk about integrations, it's really about setting up those systems. So marketing, similar to all the things that each of you are talking about, what makes a good business, setting up proper systems, thinking about in terms of as you start to acquire in that acquisition velocity, when is the right time to start changing those systems and making sure they come into alignment. So those are things that I think that are really important and probably come into the decision making on all sides, whether you're being bought or selling.
Tracy, do you think having a well promoted and well-positioned brand of the marketplace helps if you're looking to buy other companies?
If you're the buyer, you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think that brand awareness is really important overall, but that continuity of it. And then as you're looking to buy, to make sure that it's getting more and more competitive too. Like the acquisition market, we talk about that this is growing. So I think like maybe earlier on, people were more acquire, and kind of work on that. But I think there is a little bit more of a focus on making sure that we have the marketing of the brands that are acquiring, that we develop that. And it does depend upon that acquisition velocity too, how much time and energy we spend on that in proportion to the buying part.
How do you integrate from a marketing perspective? And maybe other people here have a comment on that, but
Mhm.
how do you integrate your marketing and the company's marketing
Mm.
that you're buying?
Yeah, and I think that that all really depends on individual situations. And the important part that I think that is to really preserve the pieces that I can't remember who said it, like to think about the end goal, to think about where we want to be and the things that need to happen to do that. And the sooner that integration happens, that you have the reporting you need, that you can see where revenue is coming from that you can kind of have the information that you need to make business decisions is really the important piece.
Did anyone here want to comment on the integration of marketing as well?
Well, I work with Halstead, so I'm super pleased with the approach that they've taken with us in making sure that we're connected and prepared as we scale and grow. Just having the system and the process to be able to execute that as we move forward. I'm a design build guy at heart, so I like structure, I like process, but I also like things to be done well and right. And so that's what Halstead has helped us do is create that system and process and be ready and poised to make sure that things are connected and not fragmented as we move forward with data aggregation and disaggregation where needed inside of those platforms. So,
You bring up a good point, Bill. You and maybe Ted said, and you definitely said, I didn't have the infrastructure with one of my first acquisitions. Halstead is a big enough company where they have the infrastructure for no matter what your needs are. I'm sure we've all experienced working with a marketing company where you're like, my God, they're too stretched. They can't take care of me. If I'm not a squeaky wheel, I don't get anything from them, right? We've all had that experience.
or they're specialized in one or two areas when we really need to be focused on the five main components of marketing. So my approach to marketing is like I want to hire the best firm that I can afford and pay them, as long as I possibly can to do everything until it makes sense to maybe in-house one thing or, two things or something like that. So.
Ed and Scott, have you guys had any horror stories from a marketing perspective or any just stories that we should pay attention to?
I don't want to say who the marketing company was, but we've worked with a marketing company before that was stretched far too out there, and could barely meet with us on the cadence that they selected. And it was just kind of excuse after excuse with turnover. And we got other clients that were working on. Those are things you never want to hear, right? That would be the equivalent of us telling a client of ours, well, we're just kind of too busy for you. I mean, what do you think's going to happen in that world? So I was kind of shocked to hear that. But I think, it kind of answers the question itself. It's just, if we can't do it as a business to our clients, I don't expect, a marketing company to do it to us.
Excellent.
I probably
Okay.
have the least to contribute here, but you've heard people say this before. We're a marketing company that does landscaping. We're a landscape company that doesn't do marketing. So I'm probably the worst person to talk to about marketing.
Well, you are heavy relationship oriented, as you've told us on the podcast. And so that is your marketing really, but it's not the traditional marketing.
Not the traditional marketing. And as a matter of fact, our one of the companies, the landscape architecture firm that we acquired, are brilliant marketers. I would say brilliant marketers. So I expect we're going to be improving with time.
There you go.
I have
Listen,
a question for Tracy.
go ahead, Sean.
Yeah.
So, during COVID, I think our clients' average spend on marketing was at most 1%, maybe a few that were really trying to get into a new market touched 2, probably a lot less than 1, right? Now, it's very common to be 2 to 3% of revenue on marketing spend. When you are getting into an acquisition, maybe it's a new branch, it's a new market, what should someone budget for marketing spend to support that effort, especially if there's a rebrand involved?
Mm.
Yeah, and I think that that's a good question, especially compared to COVID. I definitely want people to not use those numbers because those were different times, right? And I think that some of the things in terms of marketing spend with the branches and the acquisitions definitely go to what the timing is, right? So if you want to acquire someone and roll them up into the company like in the next year or so, we definitely want to spend enough money on that company you're acquiring in marketing so that they're then filling the funnel, they're driving revenue into the holding company. So I think that that's really important in terms of thinking about that and the amount of growth. And I guess it probably also depends upon their current revenue in terms of what that company is doing and how much you want to grow that on percent of the whole business.
I guess what you're saying, Sean, is, or what we're all saying is, marketing has to be part of that integration checklist. You
I
better
think it's got to be part of the budget, right? The
Yeah.
acquisition budget. What are you going to spend to push not only
Mhm.
your existing core business, but the new one too?
I think it's a lot higher than 2%. I think 2% is like the benchmark in our industry, but in the trades, it's about 7 to 12%.
Mhm.
And if you're in like a green field, so you're starting from scratch, we've worked with companies that have budgeted a 30 percentile on marketing if, they're starting in a new
Mhm.
area. So
well,
I think it's key.
fertilizer definitely spends more, right? The
Yeah.
profit margins are so high and the competition is so high. Is that true for irrigation service?
Yeah, we play in between 7 and 10% of revenue on marketing.
In irrigation service?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a transactional business.
And margins are so high it can support it.
Yeah, and it's a little bit lower, like CapEx over time.
Excellent. So I know our time is up here by 10 minutes. Sean, any final thoughts you want to say before I turn it over to Halstead again?
I think no matter what your goals are, you should pretend as though you are preparing your business for sale. And so all the things that you heard about the buy side today would be all the things I would be working on and improving in my business. Jeffrey, you opened with a lot of our clients have been acquired by a big brand, right? And that's because of all the work we put into systems and processes and people and having the right people in the right seat. All of those things matter. So if you continue to invest as though you were about to sell, you will always be in a better position no matter what you do. And I know I and anyone on my team would love to help anybody listening do that.
We read the book Finish Big. I'm sure you guys here have all read it. And in the book, it says you need a 10-year path for the ultimate sale. So if you think, it's 10 years off, right, start right now with what Sean was saying. I want to thank you guys for being on, and I want to turn it back to Halstead for the final words here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you all so much for your time today. It's definitely these kind of conversations people are interested in and are moving the industry forward. And like we said at the start, so valuable to hear like the actual examples of your experience. I think that that's really important for people. And thank you all for being really valuable, vulnerable in terms of sharing that. Special thank you to you, Jeffrey, for helping to lead this thoughtful conversation. And we'll send out a recording in the next few weeks on this. And thank you again all for your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye.